Ka tangi te titi, ka tangi te kākā, ka tangi toki aho, tihei Māori ora. Kia ora koutou. I'm here to tell you a story of heartbreak and hope and aspiration. In 2015, 196 countries convened at the United Nations Climate Convention in Paris and agreed to hold the increase in global average temperatures to well below 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels. Every country that signed on onto the Paris Agreement agreed to set nationally determined contributions, or NDCs. The NDC outlines the contribution each country will make towards the goals of the Paris Agreement. And just prior to the United Nations Climate Convention COP in 2021, New Zealand ratcheted up its ambition, its NDC, and we committed to 50% reduction of net emissions below our gross 2005 level by 2030. That's less than 6 years from now. Global action and targets are yet to be realised, and for the first time, global warming has exceeded 1.5 degrees across an entire year. And the longer-term averages, typically calculated over 20 years, also are increasing. So to meet our international commitment, our government, like many others, is looking to purchase a significant volume of offshore carbon credits, representing some 2/3 of the action required, and a significant gap between our domestic efforts to reduce emissions and our international targets. This is also the highest proportion of an NDC to be met with offshore mitigation compared with any other OECD country, which is an alarming precedent to be setting. So what's the problem? Well, it doesn't really matter how we meet our commitments as long as we meet them, right? Well, it's not really that simple. First, urgent and deep gross emission reductions are absolutely critical for a livable future, and offsets are not a substitute for these. We need to stop climate-polluting gases at source, including how industry is powered and how we transport people and goods. Second, the first New Zealand emissions reduction plan undertook to prioritise domestic action. It is a missed opportunity for New Zealand not to invest in our own high-integrity, co-beneficial carbon removals through restoration of our degraded forests, sinks and wetlands, the benefits of which can be realised sooner, at scale and at lower cost than technological fixes being chased by countries around the world that don't have the natural advantage. Third, the cost and integrity of offshore mitigation remains unknown. It's a risky play, particularly with carbon credits coming under greater scrutiny. And this approach also creates dependencies and potential market access risks if our climate action is seen to be insufficiently ambitious or even credible, at a cost of $4 to $23 billion. The reality is we simply need removals and reductions at scale and fast. Actively helping New Zealand reduce our reliance on international carbon credit offsets, with removals that will secure enduring, high-integrity, co-beneficial carbon sequestration and storage to restore biodiversity and enhance ecosystem resilience at home. So let's talk about resilience. Ecological resilience is defined as the capacity of a system to undergo disturbance, such as an extreme weather event or even a landslide, and reorganise so as to still maintain essentially the same functions, structures and controls. And this underpins the delivery of ecosystem services and the capacity of our landscapes and communities to adapt to climate change, to be resilient. The resilience of our landscapes has declined, as you can see. Extreme weather events devastate our infrastructure, our businesses and our lives. They are impacting the very heart of society and they are unsustainable. And communities in Tairāwhiti, Hawke's Bay and Tamaki Makaurau are still dealing with the aftermath. And these weather events will happen again and again and again. And this is costing us in many ways, with the repair bill from Cyclone Gabriel and the Auckland floods estimated to be up to or more than $14.5 billion. But we know the real cost is the human cost. And as of last week, around 1,000 households are still unable to return to their homes following those extreme weather events. And many are still waiting to find out whether their storm-damaged homes will be bought out. And it's difficult to put a price on this uncertainty and grief. We are facing multiple environmental crises as a result of how we manage the land nationally and internationally. Historical clearing of native forests, coupled with unsustainable primary production, has wreaked havoc on many parts of New Zealand, here in the Hawke's Bay, taken before Cyclone Gabriel. Fertile soils are being lost at unprecedented rates and volumes, making waterways unfit for human use and ensuring our biodiversity is in decline. It's obvious that one of the biggest things we can do to improve our landscape resilience is to invest in our natural forests and biodiversity. Elizabeth Marima, Executive Secretary of the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity, said this: "Climate change is a primary driver of biodiversity loss, and climate change depends on biodiversity as part of the solution, so clearly the two are linked and cannot be separated." The United Nations states 1/3 of the greenhouse gas emissions reductions needed in the next decade could be achieved by improving nature's ability to absorb emissions. Ensuring landscape resilience at home through restoration of diverse natural forests and biodiversity enhancement will help our communities, businesses, our primary industries, and our lives. Because we depend on and are interwoven with nature, we are uniquely responsible for its stewardship. Critically, we have to invest in native biodiversity. The world is experiencing an unparalleled biodiversity crisis driven by introduced species and human pressures, made worse by the impacts of climate change. And New Zealand has one of the highest species extinction rates in the world. Native ecosystems are the homes of our endemic species, of which some 4,000 are at risk or threatened with extinction. Fully 90% of our wetlands have been lost, as well as 80% of our active sand dune ecosystems. 46% of our lakes over 1 hectare are in poor ecological health. Plant and animal pests overwhelm our old-growth native forests. Now, while 80% of New Zealand was covered in native forest before humans, just 24% old-growth forest remains. Introduced deer and other ungulates, goats, pigs, tar have devastated many forest understories, impacting their ability to regenerate. Like here in Rakiura, it looks okay, but it's not. Further eroding biodiversity. Predators like rats, stoats, possums, and cats up to 8 to 10 kilograms harm our native birds, many of which are found nowhere else in the world. While some 25,000 exotic plants, along with exotic diseases, have been introduced since humans arrived, increasingly impacting our native ecosystems. Biodiversity loss is every bit as severe as our climate crisis. The issues are fully interlinked. Now, if our climate action is heavily weighted to international carbon offsets, we don't actually tackle the fundamental steps that need to happen for a successful transition at home. Climate change and biodiversity loss is a complex problem with many interconnecting parts, and interconnected problems need interconnected solutions. So what if there was a way? What if we could bend the curve on the emissions gap while improving our economic and environmental resilience at home, where we work with nature rather than engineered solutions to address environmental problems like climate change and biodiversity loss? And this is the hope that I promised you. Recloaking Papatūānuku, recloaking Mother Earth, a nature-based solutions to the climate and biodiversity crisis, an ambitious national-scale environmental restoration plan that aims to restore and enhance 2 million hectares of Indigenous forest over the next 15 years. That's 8% of New Zealand's landscape, almost the size of the Waikato. Now, while all options to remove CO2 need to be on the table, our focus is on Indigenous reforestation and enhancement, deployment of nature-based solutions at scale that recognise and address the interconnected challenges, solutions that are lower cost, proven, and have the potential to deliver a whole range of other benefits, especially landscape resilience, thriving biodiversity conservation, and regional employment. Of course, reforestation by itself won't solve the climate crisis. International scientists in a recent paper in Nature emphasised that slashing greenhouse gas emissions is key. But by allowing existing trees to grow old in healthy ecosystems and restoring degraded areas, we can draw down huge volumes of carbon. The scientists also caution that mass monoculture tree planting and offsetting will not help forests realise their potential. And we know that diverse Indigenous New Zealand forests are some of the most carbon-rich in the world. But it's more than just about carbon. We can use diverse natural forests and wetlands to both absorb floodwater during intense storm events and retain sediment high up in the catchment, protecting downstream communities rather than stop banks or floodwalls, which inevitably fail. To restore species habitat, improve soil health, provide shade shelter, improve fresh water quality, and downstream marine ecosystems. Nature-based solutions align with traditional Māori knowledge and wisdom, te ao Māori, the Māori worldview, kaitiakitanga, whakapapa, and Māori as a framing for sound economics along with scientific and ecological principles that can help address the climate and biodiversity issues we're all facing. This is an approach we think can be world-leading. New Zealand has the opportunity to provide an example for the rest of the world. What does Recloaking Papatūānuku look like practically? It's about restoration, regeneration, enhancement, and planting, and long-term management of our landscapes for all of their benefits. Restoration of waterways, erodible gullies, steep erodible lands, regeneration of bare land, marginal land, unproductive land, enhancement in existing forests, seeking light wells, water sources, eco-sourcing, and long-term management of pests, animals, and weeds. Imagine an interwoven landscape where native forests are sustainably integrated with other land uses, a mosaic pattern of land use, an holistic approach to enhance native biodiversity, sequester carbon, build landscape resilience, support sustainable food and fibre production, and establish resilient communities where people are connected with nature. As I mentioned earlier, under New Zealand's first emission reductions plan, we committed to prioritising domestic climate action. But our current approach to meeting our first international target is to rely substantively on international carbon offsets. Recloaking Papatūānuku demonstrates a better long-term investment for the government to make for high-integrity carbon storage. It's also a way to avoid the transfer of wealth offshore and allocate some of the projected NDC spend on international carbon credits for domestic Indigenous restoration and reforestation, with massive co-benefits for landscape resilience, thriving biodiversity, and jobs. Modelling by McKinsey & Co gives us an indicative program cost of $12 billion for 2 million hectares over 30 years total, front-loaded for establishment with extensive animal and weed pest control and ongoing management. It's a strategic investment to bolster the primary sector's food and fibre export revenue forecast of about $54 billion just this financial year, and it gives authenticity to 100% pure New Zealand, to the $15 billion in domestic tourism spend from 5 million tourists this year. Now, New Zealand is a nation that trades on the authenticity of its clean, green credentials. An initiative such as Recloaking Papatūānuku is a critical investment in our natural infrastructure to repair and grow our natural capital. Climate and biodiversity commitments are baked into trade agreements with sanctionable risks if intentions or commitments are not met. And failure would undermine our reputation and point of difference trade leverage for New Zealand Brand Inc. Recloaking Papatūānuku reduces our risk with international trading partners. Now, whether or not government takes this idea up as urgently as we need and want, we are impressing upon them with the opportunity and benefits and highlighting the risks. Tackling policy levers that can unlock and enable progress, and collaborating with stakeholders to channel the interest and support into a workable funding model that involves the private sector. Recloaking Papatūānuku is a national plan that needs national buy-in for the program to be successful, backed by visionary and innovative leadership, cross-party political will that transcends political cycles to realise an intergenerational, enduring asset and legacy. There is a huge opportunity for New Zealand to recloak Papatūānuku and strategically restore more than 2 million hectares of diverse indigenous forest over the next 15 years. Recloaking Papatūānuku is a high-value, multi-win initiative that addresses a range of critical and interrelated ecological challenges synergistically, an idea that can and needs to be replicated elsewhere. Recloaking Papatūānuku is also a chance for New Zealand to globally pioneer the implementation of nature-based solutions at scale, at national scale, and with the degree of urgency that Papatūānuku needs and deserves. Recloaking Papatūānuku is an essential part of the New Zealand story, and it's an opportunity too precious to squander.
Our world is in crisis. Temperatures and sea levels are rising. Lands flooding, forests collapsing. People are making impossible choices. Species endangered, pushed to the brink of extinction. Has hope for a better tomorrow become too much to hope for? Ka ora te wai a te whenua hoki. Ka ora te tangata. When the water and land are well, the people are well. Imagine our world in balance. Misty, ancient, deeply green. Alive with birdsong and thriving biodiversity. More resilient to climate change. Made stronger by nature's cloak, with deep roots connecting the land together. Listen. Do you hear her? The forests, the lungs of our world are breathing. This is Papatūānuku, our Earth Mother flourishing. Today, old-growth forest covers just 24% of New Zealand, lost over generations because we allowed it. Across Aotearoa, New Zealand, over 2 million hectares of land has the potential to be recloaked in vibrant indigenous forest, interwoven with other sustainable land uses, creating ecological resilience and an enduring carbon sink. The map to get there has been researched and modelled. It is a journey that will extend beyond our lifetimes and one that must start now, so that our mokopuna, our grandchildren, and their children's children don't have to close their eyes to imagine a better tomorrow.
Kia ora. Thank you.